What if Wall Street's most exclusive club suddenly flung its doors wide open and I got to stroll in before anyone else even found the handle? That magic door? Well, it's hidden inside the XRP ledger. Alright, stick around because when the World Economic Forum name drops your favorite blockchain as the backbone of a billion-dollar private equity shakeup, you kind of know you've crossed a line from crypto hype into real-world power plays. And I've got the inside scoop that you'll want before anyone else wakes up. So here's how it all hit me. I'm sipping the world's most averaged iced coffee, doom scrolling on X like a responsible adult, honest. When a tweet from my buddy, this is Smoke, that's with a Q rather than an O, pings my feed. And he's basically, the Sherlock Holmes of XRP gossip. And he's screaming in all caps about a fresh WEF report. Now, you know me, I've seen enough kind of glossy PDFs to wallpaper the moon. So I almost swipe away. But then I read the line, Equity Partners launches the world's first combined private equity and debt tokenized fund, valued at $1 billion on the XRP ledger. Now, my coffee suddenly tastes like rocket fuel. Immediately, my brain jumps to the million times I've tried explaining private equity to my friends. Imagine a secret auction where only billionaires get the invitation, I'd say, and their eyes would glaze over by word 3. Now, the whole kind of scene is usually cloaked in, mahogany boardrooms, 700-page contracts, and a 5-year lockup period that feels longer than a dragon's nap. Liquidity? Forget it. Once you're in like a lobster in a trap. But here's a fund that's just slapped an extra exit sign on that trap and put the door on the XRP ledger. All right, so cue me diving into the actual WEF paper then, right? I'm scrolling past the academic fluff until my screen practically glows around a single paragraph. The authors are basically, fangirling over XRPL's decentralized layer 1 infrastructure, and I should have probably put quotations there, and its ability, of course, to digitize ownership, slash costs, and blast liquidity through global secondary markets. The translation? You can trade slices of a private equity fund the same way that you can flip Pokemon cards. Except these cards are data center investments in the US, UAE, Saudi, India, and of course Europe. And each one, potentially, rains yield instead of Charizards. So that's when the story turns from interesting headline to I need to text everyone I know, because Arium isn't just throwing another glorified token into the void. They're using a seriously grown-up toolkit, right? That's the tokenized asset lifestyle management platform. The, acronym of TALM, makes me kind of think of a new Marvel villain. And the kind of DYCIST protocol, which sounds like dicest, but, really means digital yield, compliance, interoperability, security, and transparency. I mean, who comes up with these things? Now, the whole stack, of course, is engineered to pamper regulators, kiss auditors on both cheeks and give them, at least I should say them and you, near instant settlement on the XRPL's lightning fast rails. Now, David Schwartz, Ripple's CTO, and the unofficial professor of, ledger wizardry, if you will, summed it up like a laid-back kind of mic drop. XRPL's efficiency enables better management of tokenized private equity. Understatement of the century, Dave. It's an understatement. But let's just pause the hype train for a second here, because there's a sneaky little problem lurking behind every tokenize all things headline. And I bet you smelled it too. That's custody, right? I don't care how shiny your token is. If some hacker yanks it out of cold storage like a magician yanking a kind of tablecloth, well, your billion-dollar fund, it turns into a cautionary Reddit post. Enter 𝗕𝗘𝗪 and 𝗕𝗘𝗪. Now, 𝗕𝗘𝗪 you've probably known, and 𝗕𝗘𝗪 got scooped up by Ripple like a tasty side quest last year. Now, the WEF calls these guys essential players for safeguarding tokenized equity, because they kind of marry TradFi security standards with DeFi agility. So think of them as armored trucks that can actually moonwalk. Now, here is where my brain does that math thing that makes me kind of grin like a dog in a bullpit. The WEF kind of pegs the private equity market at $5.3 trillion in 2023 and expects it to swell to $7 trillion by 2030. Now, they predict 10% of that pie, so around $700 billion, could end up tokenized. You know, that's a pretty big number. Now, Arbitrum's kind of $1 billion pilot on the XRPL, that's just the appetizer then, right? We're talking Daytona Beach before spring break. Now, the beach chair's there, but the crowd hasn't arrived yet. And we, my friend, are the people sneaking in towels to reserve the best spots. And of course, speaking of the best spots, here's a quick reminder. If you want real-time conversation while this tidal wave hits, then our free crypto Discord server is linked downstairs, i.e. in the description. Why don't you hop in, say hi, flex your GIF game, and for those who actually want skin in the game, the Blowfin crypto exchange is also linked in the description. Yes, I know there are more exchanges than there are Starbucks at this point, but Blowfin is the kind of scrappy up-and-comer with the smooth UI and the kind of gonzo trading fees. Start trading there and you can thank me later when you save enough to surprise your fries. All right, so back to the plot twist then, right? Remember Ondo Finance? Well, in January, they actually parked their tokenized short-term US treasuries, ticker OUSG, on the XRP ledger, backed by, BlackRock's BUIDL fund. Now, that's kind of like having the Avengers and the Justice League, if I can talk today, actually co-sign your rental lease, right? Now, it legitimizes the chain beyond community memes or price speculation, and it kind of adds Ripple's Open Eden T-bill launch from 2024 to the roster, and suddenly, of course, you've got XRPL looks a lot less like the old payments chain and more like a Swiss Army knife of institutional DeFi. But of course, despite all the fireworks, the average investor still faces a mental speed bump, right? Tokenized private equities, it sounds fancy, but why should I really care, right? Let me kind of paint a bit of a picture here. Imagine you're a kind of mid-career coder in Dubai with a little side cash, right? Traditional private equity minimum, maybe $250,000 and a handshake with a gatekeeper, right? Your money kind of hibernates for 5 to 10 years. Now, liquidity events are rarer than polite drivers on Sheikh Zayed Road at rush hour. Anyone who's in Dubai will know what that means. Now, tokenized PE on the XRPL, it kind of flips the script, right? You could own a $500 slice of a data center project, watch it appreciate, and offload your position any Tuesday morning before coffee. It's kind of like having a cheat code to the big league table without dressing up for it. Now, here's another hurdle though, compliance, paranoia. Regulators have the reflexes of a cat near a cucumber, but the dicest protocol kind of bakes compliance into every transfer. That's KYC, AML, lockup logic, all coded in. So if you're kind of sitting in Abu Dhabi and your friend in Berlin wants your token chunk, the protocol basically asks, are you two legit, right? Faster than you can say MICA. And if the answer is yes, the transfer's done before your latte gets cold. So let's go ahead and zoom out to the macro mode. Why is the WEF so jazzed? Well, it's actually because tokenization doesn't just remodel private equity. It actually bulldozes the entire house of how we perceive ownership, right? Remember when Spotify replaced CDs overnight? Tokenization can do that to share certificates, property titles, even carbon credits. Now, Arium's kind of $1 billion fund is the opening rift of that playlist. But perfection? Not yet. The WEF's report tosses a kind of subtle side eye at interoperability challenges. Right? These are fancy words, but the simple issue is that if your token lives on one chain and the buyer's wallet is on another, you need a translator. Now, the XRPL's sidechains and potential bridges do help, but the industry still needs standards like a United Nations of blockchains. Also, there's legacy between legal frameworks, or I should say latency between legal frameworks, right? The UAE might throw a party for tokens, while, say, New York regulators RSVP maybe. Harmonizing that patchwork is slower than, well, let's say a Windows update. Still, let me share a little anecdote then. 2 months ago, I talked to a fund manager who confessed that tokenization shaved his back office costs by 70%. 70, right? He's firing fewer emails, lawyers, and couriers because smart contracts now pull those strings. When I asked him, what he'd do with the extra kind of budget, he laughed and said, probably tokenize something else. So that's kind of when I realized that it's a bit of a flywheel, right? Tokenization saves money. Savings fund, more tokenizations, and rinse and repeat until paper certificates belong in museum displays next to floppy disks. And guess who's kind of greasing that flywheel? Yep, it's Ripple. Now, while the internet argues about court cases, Ripple's actually quietly building a custody empire with Metaco, right? Push treasury products with Ondo and let Arium turn private equity into swipeable QR codes. It's kind of like arguing over the color of a train while it's already kind of pulled into the station. Now, you might be asking yourself, isn't Ethereum also doing tokenization? And sure, so is Polygon and Hedera and half of the phone book. But XRPL's secret sauce is actually threefold. It's native decentralized exchange, built-in compliance primitives, and, drumroll, no gas fees in the sense that you think of them, right? You pay minuscule drops of XRP that get burned. No jittery, invariable kind of gas. For institutions managing 8-figure trades, that predictability is, well, catnip. All right, so let's circle back to that $1 billion Arium fund then. The newbie kind of strapped into the XRPL's rocket seat. It kind of pegged to finance's AI-operated ESG-focused data centers. Now that trio, AI, ESG, and blockchain, it sounds like buzzword bingo, right? Until you realize that data centers guzzle electricity like a dehydrated camel. By tokenizing equities and debt, Arium kind of can fractionalize funding, get real-time ESG reporting, and maybe even pressure operators to run on renewable energies. Now, if they kind of slip token holders, or if they kind of slip, I should say, token holders can, of course, vote with their wallets on secondary markets, governance by liquidity. And now that is kind of, well, let's say accountability. And so here is the climax moment that made me nearly kind of spit out my coffee. The WEF, which loves its careful tone, actually kind of says the XRPL sets a precedent for broader adoption across asset classes. So let's think about that, right? The same institution that writes 80-page kind of treasuries or treaties, I should say, on the future work just kind of pointed at the XRPL and said, see this? Watch closely. Now that's kind of like the Oscars letting an indie kind of film crash best picture. So I guess the bigger question should be, what does it actually mean for you and me, right? Besides kind of bragging rights about the XRPL. Well, actually, there's two things here. One, you've got early adoption, right? Whether you're trading XRP or holding a tokenized slice of a data center, you're actually ahead of the curve, or at least ahead of the vast majority that haven't even noticed that they're in the rearview mirror. And then you've got two, which is diversification, right? Tokenization, it smashes the walls between asset classes. Soon, your crypto wallet might hold treasuries, real estate, vintage wine, and yes, private equity. Now, one interface, one click, no 17-page PDF to sign, and that's the convenience. And it's kind of democratization. And let me stress this again. None of this is financial advice. I'm just a storyteller on YouTube sharing the latest news. I am not your accountant, right? I'm just the guy who likes to ride roller coasters before the queue kind of wraps around the block. And if that sounds like your vibe, then hit that Discord link, float your wildest theories and maybe even beat me to the next on-chain gem. And if you want to test the waters, fire up the Blowfin account, exchange account, through the link that's in the description down below. It's, intuitive enough that my aunt can even use it. And she still prints her emails. So why don't you grab some XRP, poke around the market, and feel the rails beneath your feet. All right then, so let's go ahead and land the plane, as they say. The World Economic Forum just stamped a giant blue check mark on XRPL by spotlighting a $1 billion tokenized private equity and debt fund. Arium kind of equity partners provide the ammunition, right? You've got the Onyx and the diecast, or dicest, I should say, loaded the chamber, and Ripple, they supplied the barrel, and BitGo and Metaco are guarding the vault. Now, in the kind of inches high kind of fine print, if you will, the WEF is basically hinting that 10% of a $7 trillion market could flow on-chain by 2030, and XRPL is already logging flight hours. Now, if that doesn't make your inner investor sit bolt upright, you need to check your pulse. And are you ready for the kicker? This story isn't just about one fund or even one chain. It's actually about finance itself and how it is moving from dusty ledgers to frictionless digital skin. And tokens are the receptors. Now, whether you buy a slice today or watch from the bleachers, the scoreboard's already lighting up. So next time that someone calls crypto just speculation, send them this tale of a $1 billion private equity revolution blessed by the World Economic Forum, built on the XRP ledger and accessible from your phone before your coffee even cools.